The radio telescope array in Chile had been listening to space for 47 years without hearing anything more exciting than cosmic background radiation. Dr. Maya Reeves checked her coffee mug and found it empty again, as she stared at the computer screen showing wave patterns that made no sense. The signal had started 3 hours ago at exactly 14:32 local time, and every antenna pointed toward the constellation Perseus was picking up the same impossible transmission. Run the pattern analysis again, Maya told her assistant Ben, who looked just as confused as she felt. The computers had already processed the signal 17 times, each result showing the same thing. This was not natural cosmic noise, solar interference, or equipment malfunction. Something out there was deliberately sending a message toward Earth. The signal came in bursts of mathematical sequences, prime numbers, and basic geometric patterns. Maya recognized the approach from every first contact protocol ever written by scientists who dreamed of this moment. Someone was trying to establish that they understood mathematics and logic. Someone wanted to talk. By the time the sun set over the Atacama Desert, teams from NASA, the European Space Agency, and 12 universities were working together to decode the transmission. Maya barely noticed the helicopters landing outside or the government officials filling her research station. All she could think about was the message slowly revealing itself on her screens. The first breakthrough came at midnight when Dr. Park from MIT realized the signal included a basic translation matrix. The aliens were teaching them their language in real time, starting with simple concepts and building toward complex ideas. Maya watched symbols transform into meaning, mathematical relationships becoming words, and words becoming sentences. They call themselves the Kehari, Ben announced to the crowded room after 6 hours of work, and they are asking for help. Maya felt her stomach drop as the translation program revealed the full message. The Kehari were part of something called the Galactic Council, a group of peaceful species that had been living in harmony for thousands of years. But something had gone wrong. Something called the Devourers had appeared from the dark spaces between galaxies and was consuming everything. In its path, the message described worlds stripped clean of all life. Entire star systems reduced to empty space and billions of beings absorbed into something that the Kehari could only call a living nightmare. They had tried diplomatic contact, technological solutions, and military resistance. Nothing worked. The Devourers adapted to every strategy, learned from every defeat, and grew stronger with each world they consumed. Maya read the translation 3 times before believing it. The Galactic Council had detected Earth's radio and television signals decades ago. They had been watching humanity's wars, studying their conflicts, and analyzing their violence. What they found had terrified them initially, but now it represented their only hope. "They want our soldiers," Maya whispered to herself as she read the final section of the message. The aliens were not asking for Earth's technology, science, or diplomacy. They wanted humanity's warriors. They wanted the species that had turned warfare into both an art and a science. The beings who could look at impossible odds and find a way to win. The message included detailed star charts showing the location of Theron 7, the last world where Galactic Council forces were making a stand. The Devourers would reach that system in approximately 3 Earth months. After that, they would continue their expansion toward populated sectors of the galaxy, consuming everything in their path until nothing remained but empty space. General Patricia Stone arrived the next morning with a full military escort and security clearance that made Maya's head spin. She listened to the translation without expression, asked 3 specific questions about the aliens' military capabilities, and then spent an hour in secure communication with someone in Washington. "Dr. Reeves," the general said finally, "I need you to send a reply to this signal. Tell these Kehari that Earth has received their message and is considering their request. Ask them for detailed information about their enemy's capabilities, weaknesses, and tactics. We need to know exactly what we would be fighting." Maya typed the response using the translation matrix the aliens had provided. The reply came back within hours, and it painted a picture that made even experienced military officers uncomfortable. The Devourers were not just aggressive aliens or advanced technology gone wrong. They were something like a living disease that turned entire civilizations against themselves. Every being the devourers captured became part of their collective consciousness. Every ship they destroyed was rebuilt using materials from consumed worlds. Every tactic used against them became part of their knowledge base. They had defeated species with technology thousands of years ahead of Earth, civilizations with military traditions spanning millennia, and races that had evolved specifically for warfare. Why do they think we can succeed where others failed? General Stone asked after reading the complete tactical analysis. Maya looked at the final section of the alien message and felt a chill run down her spine. The Kahari had studied humanity's history, watching their television broadcasts and monitoring their communications. They had seen something in human warfare that other species lacked. While galactic civilizations fought according to established rules, honored traditions, and logical strategies, humans fought to win at any cost. The aliens had watched human soldiers succeed through improvisation when their equipment failed, continue fighting when logic said they should surrender, and find victory in situations that should have meant certain death. They had seen humans turn defeats into strategic advantages, use their enemies' strengths against them, and fight wars of attrition that more advanced species could not comprehend. They think we're crazy enough to beat something that can't be beaten, Maya translated from the final transmission. They want us because we fight wars that sane species would never attempt. General Stone studied the star charts for several minutes before making her decision. Dr. Reeves, send one more message. Tell the Kahari that humanity will provide military assistance. Tell them we need detailed specifications for their transportation technology and complete tactical data on every encounter with these devourers. And tell them we're going to need 3 months to prepare. As Maya typed the response, she realized that humanity was about to enter a war unlike anything in their history. They were not fighting for territory, resources, or ideology. They were fighting for the survival of civilizations they had never met, against an enemy that had already proven capable of destroying species far more advanced than humanity. The Kahari response came back immediately, filled with coordinates, technical specifications, and what could only be described as desperate gratitude. Maya saved the files and began preparing for humanity's first interstellar war, wondering if the aliens understood exactly what kind of help they had just requested. Colonel James Wright had killed his first enemy soldier at the age of 19 during a peacekeeping mission that went wrong in Eastern Europe. 26 years later, he stood in a secure conference room beneath the Pentagon looking at personnel. Files for the most dangerous human beings currently alive on Earth. The president had given him an impossible mission: assemble a force capable of winning a war against aliens who had already defeated civilizations, thousands of years more advanced than humanity. The budget was unlimited, the authority was absolute, and the timeline was 3 months. Wright opened the first file and saw a photograph of Tom Bradley, former Navy SEAL who had spent 15 years in operations so classified that most of the mission details were still redacted. Bradley had earned 3 Purple Hearts, 2 Silver Stars, and a reputation for completing missions that other Special Forces teams considered impossible. The second file belonged to Lisa Kane, a Marine sniper, with confirmed kills in 7 different countries and a tactical mind that had impressed every commanding officer she had ever served under. Kane could hit targets at ranges that pushed the limits of current rifle technology, but more importantly, she could read battlefield conditions and predict enemy movements with an accuracy that bordered on supernatural. Wright continued through the stack. Robert Park, a combat engineer who specialized in turning civilian infrastructure into military assets. Patricia Martinez, an Air Force pilot who had never lost a dogfight and could fly anything with wings or engines. David Chung, a former Army Ranger who had spent 5 years training resistance movements in occupied territories. Each file represented someone who had proven their ability to survive and succeed in situations where normal people would die. Wright was not looking for soldiers who followed orders perfectly or maintained military discipline under pressure. He needed people who could think independently, adapt quickly, and win battles through methods that military academies did not teach. The recruitment process began immediately. Wright flew to 12 countries in 2 weeks, meeting with active duty soldiers, discharged veterans, and a few individuals whose current activities existed in legal gray areas. He offered each candidate the same deal: participate in a mission that could not be discussed publicly, would likely result in combat against an unknown enemy, and had no guarantee of survival or return to Earth. Every person he approached accepted. Immediately, Dr. Maya Reeves had been working 18-hour days since the first alien transmission, collaborating with engineers and physicists to reverse engineer Kahari technology. The aliens had provided detailed specifications for their faster-than-light communication systems, energy weapons, and defensive shields. But converting those designs into something humans could manufacture was proving incredibly difficult. Their technology is based on principles we barely understand, Maya explained to a room full of military contractors and Defense Department officials. They manipulate gravitational fields like we use electricity, and their material science is centuries ahead of ours. We need to find ways to adapt their designs using Earth-based manufacturing techniques. The breakthrough came from Robert Park, who suggested approaching alien technology like improvised explosive devices rather than precision instruments. Instead of trying to perfectly replicate Kahari energy weapons, human engineers created simplified versions that were less efficient but much easier to mass-produce. Human-made plasma rifles could not match the power output or reliability of alien weapons, but they could be manufactured in quantities that made up for individual limitations. Earth's military-industrial complex began producing equipment designed for a war unlike anything in human history. Meanwhile, Wright's selected team gathered at a training facility in Nevada that had been expanded and modified specifically for preparing soldiers to fight in alien environments. The trainees learned to operate in zero gravity, practiced combat techniques for different atmospheric conditions, and studied tactical scenarios based on Kahari intelligence reports about devourer capabilities. The aliens had provided detailed information about their enemy, and the picture that emerged was both fascinating and terrifying. The devourers operated as a collective consciousness that could instantly share knowledge and experiences across vast distances. Individual devourer units had no fear, felt no pain, and possessed perfect coordination with other units. Traditional military tactics assumed that enemy forces would have human-like motivations, self-preservation, limited communication, and individual decision-making capabilities. The devourers possessed none of these characteristics, which explained why conventional strategies had proven useless against them. Lisa Kane spent hours analyzing recordings of Galactic Council battles against the devourers, looking for patterns that alien military commanders had missed. "They fight like a computer simulation," she told Wright during one of their evening briefings. "Perfect coordination, optimal resource allocation, no emotional responses. But that might actually be a weakness." Wright nodded as he studied tactical reports from civilizations that had already fallen to the devourers. The alien species had approached warfare as a logical exercise, using mathematical models to predict outcomes and minimize casualties. When those approaches failed, they had no backup strategies. Humans fight differently, Wright realized. We use intuition, unpredictability, and emotional responses that computers cannot model. We make decisions that do not follow logical patterns. And we succeed through methods that should not work according to mathematical analysis. The training program evolved to emphasize humanity's natural advantages. Instead of teaching soldiers to be more like aliens, instructors focused on developing uniquely human capabilities, the ability to function effectively in chaos, make rapid decisions with incomplete information, and continue fighting when logical. Analysis suggested surrender. Dr. Park presented his final equipment recommendations 6 weeks before the departure date. The human force would carry simplified versions of alien technology alongside modified Earth-based weapons and equipment. More importantly, they would bring manufacturing capabilities that would allow them to continue adapting and improving their technology during the mission. "The aliens think in terms of perfect solutions that work indefinitely," Park explained. Humans think in terms of temporary solutions that can be improved continuously. Our equipment is designed to be modified, upgraded, and replaced as we learn more about what we're fighting. General Stone reviewed the final mission parameters with Wright and his team leaders. The human force would travel to Theron 7 using a modified Kahari transport system, arriving just as the Devourers reached that system. Their mission was simple in concept but incredibly complex in execution: find a way to defeat an enemy that had proven immune to every strategy attempted by more advanced civilizations. "We have one advantage that other species lacked," Wright told his assembled soldiers on the final day of training. "The Devourers have never fought humans before. They know how to defeat logical, predictable enemies who follow established military doctrines. They have no experience with opponents who view warfare as an art form rather than a science." The human force launched from Earth 48 hours later, traveling toward their first interstellar war aboard ships built from alien technology and human engineering. They carried weapons that combined principles from both civilizations, tactics that no military academy had ever taught, and a reputation for succeeding in impossible situations. As Earth faded behind them, Wright looked at his soldiers and realized they represented something unique in galactic history: a military force specifically designed to fight an enemy that could not be defeated through conventional means. The Kahari had asked for humanity's most dangerous beings, and they were about to discover exactly what that meant. Theron 7 looked like a world dying from cancer. Tom Bradley pressed his face against the transport ship's viewing port and watched orbital defense platforms drift dark and lifeless around a planet whose surface showed scars from weapons that had carved valleys where cities once stood. The Kahari ships that approached their human transport moved with a grace that reminded Bradley of dancers, their hulls reflecting the system's red sun like polished mirrors. Everything about alien technology appeared elegant and purposeful, designed by beings who valued beauty alongside function. Then the alien commander came aboard their ship, and Bradley understood why the Galactic Council needed help. "High General." Athane stood nearly 3 meters tall with 4 arms that ended in delicate hands designed for precise manipulation rather than combat. His species had evolved from herbivorous creatures on a world where cooperation meant survival, and every aspect of his behavior reflected that peaceful heritage. "Welcome to our final stronghold," Athane said through a translation device that rendered his musical voice into flat English. "I must confess, your appearance is quite different from what we expected after studying your transmissions." Wright stepped forward to represent the human force. "What did you expect, General?" Athane's large eyes moved nervously as he studied the humans gathered in the transport bay. "We observed your entertainment broadcasts and news reports, but we assumed your actual military forces would be more ... Your soldiers appear rather primitive compared to galactic standards." Bradley caught Wright's eye and saw the same amusement there. The aliens had spent months studying human warfare through television and movies, but they had no understanding of how human soldiers actually looked or behaved. The Kahari's idea of warriors apparently came from Hollywood rather than real battlefields. "General Athane," Wright said carefully, "I think there may have been some miscommunication. We are exactly what you requested, Earth's most dangerous military personnel. Perhaps you could show us what we're fighting so we can begin developing tactical solutions." The briefing took place in a command center that looked more like an art gallery than a military facility. Holographic displays showed beautiful 3-dimensional maps of the galaxy, marked with elegant symbols indicating Devourer advance patterns in galactic Council retreat routes. Athen began explaining their enemy with the careful precision of a scholar rather than a soldier. The Devourers first appeared in the Outer Rim territories approximately 57 of your years ago. Initial contact attempts were unsuccessful, and within 6 months they had consumed the Helix Nebula colonies. "Completely," Lisa Kane interrupted. "Consumed how exactly?" "Every living being in the affected systems was absorbed into their collective consciousness," Athane replied. "Planets were stripped of all biological and mineral resources, converted into raw materials for Devourer expansion. Nothing was left behind except empty space. Bradley studied the tactical displays and noticed something interesting. General, these attack patterns show the Devourers moving in straight lines from one target to the next. They are not using deception, flanking maneuvers, or strategic misdirection. They just advance directly toward their objectives. Correct, Athane confirmed. Their approach is remarkably straightforward. They arrive in a system, engage all defending forces simultaneously, and systematically process every planet until nothing remains. Robert Park looked confused. How do they engage defending forces? What does their military doctrine look like? Athane activated another holographic display showing a previous battle. The human soldiers watched alien ships engaging Devourer vessels in what appeared to be a formal naval battle, with clear formation, flying, and coordinated firing patterns on both sides. This is how your people fight space battles, Wright asked. This is how all civilized species engage in military conflict, Athane replied. Honor demands that opponents meet in open battle, allowing superior technology and tactical planning to determine victory. And soldiers exchanged glances. Bradley realized the problem immediately. Every galactic civilization fought wars like 18th century European armies, with formal rules, predictable strategies, and mutual respect for combat traditions. General, Kane said slowly, has any species ever tried guerrilla warfare, psychological operations, or asymmetric tactics against the Devourers? Athane looked confused. I am not familiar with those concepts. Could you explain? Wright spent the next hour describing human military history, covering everything from ancient siege warfare to modern counterinsurgency operations, he explained. How human armies had learned to win through deception, misdirection, and attacks that targeted enemy weaknesses rather than strengths. The aliens listened with growing horror as Wright described tactics that they considered dishonest, barbaric, and completely contrary to civilized military conduct. When he finished, Athane was visibly shaken. Your species deliberately attacks non-military targets to influence enemy morale? Athane asked. Sometimes, Wright admitted. War is not a game with rules, General. It is a contest where the only thing that matters is victory. Everything else is secondary. Dr. Maya Reeves had arrived on a separate transport with additional technical equipment and scientific personnel. She established communication with the surviving Galactic Council research teams, hoping to learn more about Devourer technology and capabilities. What she discovered was both full and frustrating. The aliens had detailed recordings of every battle fought against the Devourers, complete technical specifications for their weapons and ships, and thorough analysis of their tactical behavior. What they did not have was any understanding of why their superior technology had proven useless against an apparently less sophisticated enemy. The Devourers use relatively simple technology, Maya explained to Wright after reviewing the alien data. Their weapons are powerful but not particularly advanced. Their ships are functional but not elegant, and their manufacturing capabilities are impressive but not revolutionary. Then why can't the aliens beat them? Wright asked. Maya pulled up a recording of a Galactic Council fleet engaging Devourer forces. Watch this battle carefully. The aliens are using superior firepower, better shields, and more sophisticated tactics. They should win easily. The holographic battle played out exactly as Maya described, with Kahari ships clearly outmatching their Devourer opponents in every measurable category. Then something changed. Individual Devourer ships began behaving differently, adapting their tactics in real time as they learned from the battle's progression. The Devourers use each engagement as a learning experience, Maya continued. They deliberately accept losses in early battles to gather intelligence, then use that knowledge to defeat similar opponents in future encounters. Every tactical innovation the aliens develop becomes useless after a single battle. Bradley watched the recording again and noticed something else. The aliens fight the same way every time. Formation flying, coordinated attacks, predictable patterns. The Devourers learn to counter their tactics because they keep using the same tactics. Exactly, Maya confirmed. Galactic civilization has been peaceful for so long that they have forgotten how to innovate military strategy. They approach warfare like an engineering problem with optimal solutions rather than a creative exercise with infinite variables. Riot assembled his team leaders that evening to plan their first engagement with Devourer forces. Long-range sensors had detected a scout group moving toward Theron 7, arriving within 48 hours. "We have one chance to make a first impression," Wright told his officers. "The Devourers will try to learn our capabilities during this initial contact, just like they did with every other species they have encountered. We need to give them information that will be misleading rather than helpful." Kane suggested using the engagement to test Devourer responses to human tactics while revealing as little as possible about human capabilities. "We show them what they expect to see, conventional space combat with predictable patterns. But we gather intelligence about their adaptation methods and command structure." Park had been studying Devourer technology reports and noticed something interesting. Their ships are designed for efficiency rather than durability. They can be mass-produced quickly, but they have vulnerabilities that suggest they are not built for extended combat operations. Wright smiled as he looked at his team. The aliens had asked for humanity's most dangerous beings, expecting civilized soldiers who would fight a clean war against an overwhelming enemy. Instead, they had received something unique in galactic history: warriors who viewed warfare as an art form rather than a science. The Devourers had defeated every enemy they encountered because those enemies had approached warfare logically, using established doctrines and predictable strategies. They were about to encounter opponents who treated each battle as an opportunity for creative expression, with success measured by results rather than adherence to tradition. "Gentlemen and ladies," Wright said as he dismissed his officers, "tomorrow we begin teaching the galaxy a new way to fight wars." The first Devourer ships arrived in the Theron 7 system like a plague of metallic insects, their hulls dark and angular against the star field. Lisa Kane watched them through her rifle scope from the observation deck of the human command ship, counting vessels and analyzing their formation patterns. 37 ships in standard approach formation, she reported to Wright. They are moving exactly like the alien tactical recordings predicted. Direct advance, no deception, no attempts at flanking maneuvers. Wright nodded as he studied the enemy formation. The Kahari fleet was already moving to intercept, their beautiful ships arranging themselves in the precise attack patterns that had failed against Devourer forces dozens of times before. "General Athane," Wright called through the communication system, "please hold your forces back. Allow us to engage the enemy first." The alien commander's response was immediate and distressed. "Colonel Wright, your small force cannot possibly succeed where our entire fleet has failed. Please allow us to assist you in this battle." "With respect, General, your assistance is exactly why you keep losing these fights," Wright replied. "Trust us to handle this engagement according to human tactical doctrine." The human ships moved toward the Devourer formation, but not in any pattern that Kahari observers could recognize. Instead of advancing in organized lines, the human vessels spread out apparently randomly, approaching from multiple directions with no visible coordination. Tom Bradley commanded the lead attack ship, a modified Kahari vessel equipped with human-manufactured weapons and completely rebuilt command systems. His ship appeared to be retreating from the Devourer formation, broadcasting what seemed like distress signals and equipment malfunctions. The Devourers took the bait perfectly. Their ships accelerated toward Bradley's apparently disabled vessel, concentrating their firepower for what should have been an easy victory. They had learned from previous battles that isolated enemy ships could be quickly overwhelmed and absorbed into their collective consciousness. What they had never encountered was an enemy that deliberately appeared weak in order to manipulate their tactical decisions. Bradley's ship dropped its fake distress signals the moment the Devourers committed to their attack. Hidden weapon systems came online, and the apparently damaged vessel began returning fire with weapons that no Galactic Council species had ever seen. Human plasma rifles had one advantage over alien energy weapons: they were specifically designed to be unpredictable. While Kahari weapons fired with mathematical precision, Human weapons varied their power output, timing, and targeting in ways that made their performance impossible to predict or counter. The Devourers tried to adapt their defensive systems too. The new weapons, but human fire patterns changed faster than their collective consciousness could analyze and respond. Every burst of plasma fire came from a different angle, with different power levels, and with timing that followed no logical sequence. Robert Park had spent weeks designing the engagement scenario, treating it like an elaborate engineering problem. His ships were positioned to create a three-dimensional maze that forced the Devourers to make navigation decisions under fire, each choice leading them deeper into positions where human weapons could be most effective. "They are trying to learn our attack patterns," Park reported as he watched the battle develop. "But every time they think they understand our tactics, we change them completely." Lisa Kane had positioned her sniper team on asteroids throughout the engagement zone, using modified alien weapons to target specific components on Devourer ships. Her shots were not aimed at destroying enemy vessels, but at disabling their ability to share information with the collective consciousness. "Communication systems targeted and disrupted," Kane reported. "Individual Devourer ships are operating independently now without collective intelligence support." The effect was immediate and dramatic. Devourer ships that had been moving with perfect coordination suddenly began making individual tactical decisions, many of which contradicted the actions of nearby vessels. Their formation collapsed into chaos as each ship tried to respond to the battle according to its own analysis. Wright watched the engagement from the command ship, making tactical adjustments in real time as new information became available. Unlike alien commanders who followed predetermined battle plans, Wright treated each moment as an opportunity to exploit changing conditions. "All units, implement dispersal pattern 7, Wright commanded. "Target priority shifts to resource ships, ignore combat vessels unless they present immediate threats." The human attack pattern changed completely in the middle of the battle, something that alien tactical doctrine considered impossible. Human ships that had been focusing on enemy weapons suddenly began targeting support vessels and supply ships, forcing the Devourers to choose between protecting their combat capabilities and maintaining their operational infrastructure. Dr. Maya Reeves monitored the battle from the scientific observation post, recording everything for later analysis. What she saw amazed her. The Devourers were trying to adapt to human tactics, but human tactics were changing too quickly for their collective consciousness to process. "They are experiencing something like information overload," Maya reported. To Wright, "Their hive mind can analyze and counter consistent patterns, but random variation is creating computational problems they cannot solve." The battle lasted exactly 47 minutes, ending when the surviving Devourer ships broke off their attack and retreated toward the outer system. It was the first time in galactic history that Devourer forces had voluntarily withdrawn from an engagement. General Athane contacted the human command ship immediately after the enemy withdrawal. "Colonel Wright, your tactical performance was extraordinary. However, I must ask, why did you not pursue and destroy the retreating enemy vessels?" Wright smiled as he looked at his tactical displays. "Because this was not about winning a single battle, General. This was about beginning a war." The human engagement had been carefully designed to accomplish multiple objectives beyond simple victory. They had demonstrated that Devourer forces could be defeated, but more importantly, they had forced the enemy collective consciousness to waste computational resources trying to analyze human tactical patterns that followed no consistent logic. "Every minute the Devourers spend trying to understand our methods is a minute they are not spending on expanding their territory or developing new weapons," Wright explained to the assembled Kahari commanders. "We have introduced a variable into their strategic planning that cannot be calculated or predicted." Lisa Kane presented her analysis of Devourer individual ship behavior during the communication disruption phase. When they lose connection to the collective consciousness, they revert to basic tactical programming that is actually quite predictable. If we can find ways to isolate groups of enemy ships, they become much easier targets. Robert Park had already begun developing new weapons specifically designed to exploit the weaknesses they had discovered. Their ships are optimized for collective operations. Individual units have limited defensive capabilities and poor decision-making systems. We can design tactics that force them to operate independently. Dr. Maya Reeves reviewed the scientific data collected during the engagement. The Devourer collective consciousness has limitations we can exploit. It can process large amounts of tactical information very quickly, but it cannot handle multiple simultaneous variables that change unpredictably. Wright gathered his team leaders for their next planning session, looking at star charts that showed Devourer expansion patterns throughout the galaxy. The aliens had provided them with everything they needed to understand their enemy's strategic objectives and operational capabilities. The Kahari have been fighting individual battles against an enemy that thinks in terms of galactic conquest, Wright observed. They treat each engagement as a separate military problem, but the Devourers view every battle as part of a larger strategic campaign. Patricia Martinez had been analyzing Devourer fleet movements and noticed something interesting. They are not just expanding randomly. They are targeting specific systems that provide strategic advantages, manufacturing capabilities, resource-rich worlds, and transportation hubs. Which means we can predict where they will attack next, Wright realized. And if we can predict their movements, we can prepare surprise attacks that will be much more effective than reactive defenses. The human commanders spent the night planning their next phase of operations, developing strategies that no galactic civilization had ever attempted. Instead of trying to defend fixed positions against Devourer attacks, they would begin hunting Devourer forces throughout the galaxy, using mobility and unpredictability to force the enemy into defensive positions, General Athane observed the human planning session with growing amazement. These soldiers from a primitive world were proposing military operations that violated every principle of civilized warfare. Yet their methods had proven effective against an enemy that had defeated the galaxy's most advanced civilizations. Colonel Wright, Athane said finally, your species approaches warfare in ways that our military theorists would consider impossible. You treat battles like art rather than science. Wright looked up from the tactical displays and smiled. General, that is exactly why you asked for our help. The Devourer home system looked exactly like what Maya Reeves expected from a species that consumed entire civilizations. A massive artificial construct built from the remains of 1,000 dead worlds, orbiting a star that had been modified to provide optimal energy output for industrial operations, Wright's intelligence network had taken 8 months to locate this system, following supply routes and communication patterns back through dozens of conquered territories. The Devourers had never needed to hide their central operations because no enemy had ever posed a threat to their core infrastructure. That was about to change. 67,000 individual ships, Tom Bradley reported from the reconnaissance vessel. Industrial platforms the size of small moons, manufacturing facilities that could produce entire fleets, and defensive systems that make every previous battle look like training exercises. Lisa Kane studied the target through high-powered sensors, identifying critical systems and potential weak points. The whole construct is connected through a central command structure. If we can disrupt their primary coordination systems, individual sectors should lose communication with each other. The plan Wright had developed required coordination across multiple star systems simultaneously, using human forces that had been training and fighting Devourers for almost a year. Every engagement had taught them something new about their enemy, and every lesson had been incorporated into an increasingly sophisticated understanding of how to defeat a collective consciousness. Robert Park commanded engineering teams throughout the galaxy, building weapons and equipment specifically designed for this final assault. Human manufacturing had evolved far beyond simple copies of alien technology, developing hybrid systems that combined the best aspects of both civilizations. We have 43 separate assault groups positioned around systems the Devourers consider strategically important, Park reported during the final planning meeting. Each group is equipped with localized manufacturing capabilities and communication, systems that can operate independently if the main force is compromised. Dr. Maya Reeves had solved the most critical problem: how to attack an enemy whose collective consciousness could instantly share tactical information across galactic distances. Her solution was both elegant and terrifying in its implications. "We are going to flood their information network with false data," Maya explained to the assembled commanders. "Every human attack will be accompanied by thousands of fake assault signals, false tactical reports, and misleading strategic intelligence. Their collective consciousness will be forced to process more information than it can handle." The concept was based on human-computer warfare techniques, scaled up to galactic proportions. Instead of attacking devourer ships directly, human forces would attack their ability to think clearly by overwhelming their information processing capabilities with meaningless data. General Athane listened to the human battle plan with an expression that Maya could only describe as horrified fascination. "Colonel Wright, you are proposing to attack their minds rather than their bodies? Is this not a form of torture?" Wright considered the question seriously before answering. "General, they have absorbed billions of sentient beings into their collective consciousness against their will. Every person they have consumed is still alive inside their network, experiencing whatever the devourers experience. If we succeed, we will be liberating those consciousness as much as defeating an enemy." The assault began simultaneously across 17 different systems, each attack carefully timed to create maximum confusion in the Devourer command network. Human forces struck supply convoys, manufacturing facilities, and communication relays. But their primary targets were the information systems that connected individual Devourer units to their collective consciousness. Lisa Kane led the precision strike team that infiltrated the central command construct, using stealth technology that the Devourers had never encountered before. Human soldiers moved through the massive structure like ghosts, planting devices that would disrupt information flow at critical moments during the main assault. "Data corruption devices placed at primary network nodes," Kane reported through. "Encrypted communication channels. Ready to activate on your command." Tom Bradley commanded the main assault force, attacking the defensive perimeter around the Devourer home system with tactics that had been refined through dozens of previous engagements. His ships moved in patterns that appeared chaotic but were actually carefully choreographed to create specific responses from the enemy defense systems. "Enemy forces are responding according to predicted patterns," Bradley reported. "They are concentrating their defenses around critical infrastructure, exactly as our tactical models predicted." Wright coordinated the assault from a command ship positioned at the edge of the system, monitoring 17 different battles simultaneously while managing the information warfare campaign that Maya had designed. Every few minutes, human transmitters broadcast false tactical data designed to confuse the Devourer collective consciousness. The effect was immediate and devastating. Devourer ships began receiving contradictory orders from their command network, with individual units trying to respond to tactical situations that did not exist. Their perfect coordination collapsed as their collective consciousness struggled to distinguish between real threats and artificial ones. "Information overflow is reaching critical levels," Maya reported as she monitored Devourer communication networks. "Their processing capabilities are being overwhelmed by the volume of false data we are feeding into their systems." Robert Park's engineering teams activated their hidden weapons throughout the galaxy, targeting Devourer installations that had been identified during months of intelligence gathering. Manufacturing facilities exploded, supply routes were severed, and communication relays went dark as human forces struck at the infrastructure that supported Devourer expansion. The collective consciousness began to fragment under the pressure. Individual Devourer ships started making independent tactical decisions, many of which conflicted with the actions of nearby units. Their fleet formations dissolved into chaos as each ship tried to respond to different sets of instructions. Lisa Kane's infiltration team reached the central processing core of the Devourer home construct, a massive organic computer system that coordinated the collective consciousness across galactic distances. The structure was unlike anything human scientists had ever seen, a living brain the size of a city, pulsing with electrical activity that represented the thoughts of billions of absorbed minds. "Right, you need to see this," Kane transmitted, as our team's cameras revealed the interior of the core. The Devourers are not just using absorbed consciousness for processing power. They are keeping every individual mind alive and aware inside their network. The revelation changed everything. The Devourer collective consciousness was not a single entity, but a prison containing billions of sentient beings forced to participate in their own enslavement. Every tactical decision, every attack, every expansion was being planned and executed by the minds of their victims. Wright made a decision that would haunt him for the rest of his life. "Kane, place the charges. We cannot free those minds without destroying the system that holds them." The explosions that followed were visible from across the star system. The central processing core erupted in a cascade of energy that severed the connections between individual Devourer units and their collective consciousness. For the first time in their species' history, every Devourer ship became truly independent. The results were catastrophic for their military effectiveness. Ships that had operated with perfect coordination suddenly found themselves unable to communicate with nearby units. Tactical formations collapsed, strategic planning became impossible, and individual Devourer units began making decisions based on their own limited processing capabilities. Tom Bradley's assault force pressed their advantage immediately, attacking enemy ships that could no longer coordinate their defenses or share tactical information. The battle became a series of individual engagements rather than a coordinated military operation, and human forces excelled at winning individual fights through superior tactical flexibility. Dr. Maya Reeves monitored the collapse of the Devourer network from her scientific observation post, recording the end of a collective consciousness that had dominated the galaxy for decades. The data streams that had carried the thoughts of billions of absorbed minds went silent one by one until nothing remained but empty communication channels. "The collective consciousness has been completely severed," Maya reported. Individual Devourer units are now operating independently, without access to shared tactical knowledge or strategic coordination. The cleanup operation took 3 more months, with human forces hunting down isolated Devourer ships throughout the galaxy. Without their collective consciousness, individual units were revealed to be relatively simple entities with limited adaptive capabilities and predictable behavioral patterns. General Athane observed the final battles with a mixture of admiration and horror. The humans had succeeded where every galactic civilization had failed, but their methods had required them to make moral choices that peaceful species could not comprehend. "Colonel Wright," Athane said during the victory ceremony, "on Theron 7, your species has saved our civilization, but I fear we may have learned something about warfare that we should not know." Wright looked out at the stars where human soldiers were still hunting the last Devourer remnants, knowing that his species had proven its effectiveness at galactic warfare in ways that would have consequences for centuries to come. "General, you asked for our help because you needed someone dangerous enough to defeat an impossible enemy. Mission accomplished." The aftermath brought challenges that no one had anticipated. Word of humanity's military capabilities spread throughout the galaxy faster than any government could control. Within months, representatives from dozens of species were arriving at Earth, some seeking military assistance and others demanding that humanity be contained before they became a threat to galactic peace. Maya received communications from civilizations requesting human military advisors, defense contractors wanting to purchase human weapons technology, and intelligence agencies seeking information about human tactical methods. Earth had become the galaxy's premier source for military expertise. Wright found himself promoted to general and placed in command of Earth's first interstellar military command, responsible for coordinating human military activities throughout the galaxy. The soldiers who had volunteered for a single desperate mission were now the core of a military force that every civilization wanted to either hire or neutralize. "We came here to save the galaxy from the Devourers," Wright told Maya during one of their planning sessions for new missions. "Instead, we may have introduced something more dangerous than what we defeated." Maya looked at the requests for assistance piling up on her desk. Mining companies wanting protection from pirates. Colonial governments requesting help with rebellion. Suppression and military alliances seeking human participation in territorial disputes. The galaxy spent thousands of years developing peaceful solutions to conflicts, she realized. We just reminded them that sometimes violence is more effective than negotiation. The final transmission in Maya's records came from a species in the Andromeda Galaxy requesting assistance with an existential threat that their own military forces could not handle. The message was almost identical to the first Kahari transmission that had started humanity's involvement in galactic affairs. Wright read the message and smiled grimly. It looks like we are going to be very busy. Humanity had found its place among the stars, not as explorers, diplomats, or scientists, but as the galaxy's reluctant specialists in warfare. They were the species that other civilizations called when peaceful solutions failed and extinction was the only alternative to victory. The universe was a dangerous place, and Earth's most dangerous beings had just become its guardians.